So our final lightning talk, I forgot what they're called then, lightning talk person for today is Rituja Rao, who is from Deliveroo, a senior project manager from Deliveroo, has joined us today and has travelled up and navigated the train strikes to be with us here today. Yay. And I'd like, well done for that. But yeah, I would like to welcome you to the stage and thank you very much for being part of our event today. She's also an ambassador for Tech Talent Charter, and I'll talk a little bit more of that towards the end. But Tech Talent Charter is something the LEP and the Digital Skills Partnership have signed to outwardly show our commitment to diversity and inclusion in the tech sector. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that afterwards. Brilliant.
Thank you. Amazing. I hope you can all hear me. Hope the stream has me audible. Amazing. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for that great introduction, Kerry. I'm just buzzing with ideas from today. And it's been quite difficult to hear everything and not let that affect the subject of what I'm going to talk today, because I think we've touched upon a lot of the themes that I'm going to be talking about today. I think when it comes to the diversity and inclusion topic, it's quite wide. And I think we all have different experiences with the theme. The one I'm going to focus upon today a lot is skills diversity and the future of work, especially Gen Z careers. I'm not a certified psychologist, a coach, any of that. I think I see myself as a practitioner. So I'm going to talk a lot about my lived experience as a young person, a young woman of color, and also reflect upon what I think is happening in the, minds of the Gen Z. I see myself as an older Gen Z. I was born in 1997, which is the first year that you start qualifying as a Gen Z. And I think it is something that really affects my life on a day-to-day basis, and it affects how I think of my career as well. So to start off with, I'll tell you a bit about myself. I'm Rituja. My day job is I'm a senior enterprise project manager at Deliveroo. I won't talk a lot about Deliveroo because I don't think I'm qualified to. I've only been there for 4 months, but it's a fantastic company to work for at the moment. It's a very young company. I think we all have experience of Deliveroo as a consumer. What's been quite interesting since I've joined them is that it's a three-sided marketplace. So really the business is all about the consumers, the restaurants and the grocers that we work with, our partners, and our riders. So it's a very, very human-first business. Even though it's extremely technologically driven, it's there to benefit the lives of, all these three marketplaces for us. In my role, I've worn too many different hats. I'm an agile coach, delivery manager, project manager, program manager, whatever it takes. But I like to think of myself as somebody who gets things done. And a big part of that for me is my interactions with the engineering team, with the product team. And I like to think of my role sitting in the cusp of these two areas. And kind of coming into this role, I really reflect on my career, which is quite short, I want to say, in the grand scheme of things. I've only been working for about 4 years. And 4 years ago, I just can't believe that I actually graduated with a degree in journalism. A completely different world. I didn't know what I wanted, I think. But growing up, I was somebody who was good at science and math. And everybody said to me, you're going to be an engineer or a doctor, because those were the only two options in India as well. That's where I'm from. I grew up in India. But I went to this personality contest once, and I discovered I have this thing for speaking and finding voices or giving people voices. And I thought journalism is a career that's closest to that. So that's what I'm going to do. Everybody said I was throwing away my talents and that, I was making a bad decision. My parents supported me, and that's all it took. I also come from a working class background in India. Never imagined of studying abroad whatsoever. Lied to my parents when I first applied to the UK because they thought it was too expensive or they did not want me to be away from home. Lied to them and didn't think anything was ever going to happen. But then I got a full scholarship at the University of Westminster. Changed my life completely. Didn't think that would ever happen or that was an option. Started studying journalism. came to the UK, love journalism, fall in love with it. I get some fantastic opportunities. My first year, I do an internship at the BBC, which I thought, this is it. My life's done. I'm a journalist forever now. And it was at the BBC, actually, that I found my love for technology. Or let's put it this way, I found how much technology was changing journalism. And I realized that that's not something that I can do only, if that makes sense. I wanted more from life. Graduated, decided that's it, I'm going to get into technology. No technical education, no means of paying for a master's, so that was not an option. Applied to 200 jobs, I remember, went to 50 random interviews, 3 final interviews, got 1 job. I was a consultant. They taught me technology for 8 weeks before I went into my role. And I remember there was a exercise we had to do. It was a SQL-based coding exercise. And they said that somebody in the class had scored 100%. Everybody's looking around. There was a particular person in the class who thought it was him. Turns out it was me. I had no idea. I'd never touched coding before that. But it was great because I realized, actually, I'm also good at this. Not just good at this, but I'm also good at this. When I came into technology, I think project management fit me quite well. I think my personality is all about, like, I love talking to people. I love getting people to work together. I like taking an idea from A to B. And that's when I kind of fit into project management. But that came a new can of worms where I was suddenly working with engineers, solution architects from around the world. I was working within the banking sector to start off with. So I've worked with HSBC, Lloyds, Barclays, NatWest being my latest one. And people did not want to take direction from me. So really struggled with that. I think there was a new element of age that was suddenly added to, let's say, my profile. And I was struggling with that a little bit. And I thought, I'm too assertive, I'm too aggressive if I stand up for myself. But if I don't, then what does that say? I'm not able to do my job correctly. And that's when I sort of discovered a fantastic community called Tech Up Women. They're also now called Tech Up, which is a reskilling boot camp supported by some fantastic organizations and universities across the UK. I was one of their first 100 women that were reskilling or upskilling. In my case, a lot of the upskilling was coding based, which I loved. But what I loved more was I found a knack for public speaking, but a lot for like coaching and consulting, which kind of made me feel like I was going back in touch with my journalism background. So now I kind of feel like I have this day job and I have all the things that I do on the side. And all these things are very whatever I want to do, to be honest with you. I sit on a lot of boards as a trustee, especially when it comes to skills diversity, social mobility, and also supporting women in tech. All of this was just a story to kind of say that I've come to realize that I think of my career very differently than some of my colleagues and some of the other people I've worked with. And that has sometimes made me feel like, what am I doing? Is this right? And I've had people say some comments to me such as, too ambitious, or put your head down and just take in a job for long enough. I've left jobs previously, 10 months, 1 year. I tend to get bored, to be very honest with you. And somebody said, oh, this is never going to last. It's not sustainable, you know? But the reality is, I feel like I and a lot of other young people live in a world where we are constantly exposed to lots of different possibilities. Social media being the biggest, culprit in this case. We see people live very different lives that constantly make me feel like I should give up my job and sell something on the internet. Or like I should become good at making TikToks. You could look at my TikTok profile. I try every day. I'm just waiting to go viral. But it's interesting what this does to a young person. Young people today are feeling very hopeless, to be honest with you. It doesn't help with COVID. It doesn't help with recession. A lot of the Gen Z are actually graduating at the moment. And they're faced with a world that looks very different from what they see on their phones. And a lot of us here could kind of start saying, oh, social media is not the reality. It doesn't show the reality of people. But that's the thing that they're exposed to constantly. Added on that doesn't help that media is talking very negatively about the newer generation. Words such as snowflakes gets tossed around very casually. Kids these days don't take careers too seriously. But that's not the reality. It's actually the opposite. I think the values that Gen Z are looking for from their careers are very different. They see their careers, like I do, a vehicle for self-expression. To me, it's the way I express who I am. So if I align myself, I've recently been given a position to be a trustee on an environmental trust. To me, that's a way for me to practice my morals and values and put that into action. And I get a lot of questions of, you're not qualified enough. But what does that really mean? What does it mean not to be qualified enough? If people are given opportunities to do what they want to do, that's when they'll pick up those skills, and that will then multiply. So this brings me to one of my biggest themes of my entire brand, really, which is skills mobility and skills diversity. I think all the themes that we've been talking about today, discrimination, unconscious bias, being not given opportunities because of where you come from, who you are, what you look like, often translates into occupational mobility. People grow up in worlds where they feel like, because if their parents or their family's done something, that's what they do. They are limited by what they see in their environment, and that leads to things such as choosing or not choosing to go to university, economic barriers, and a lot of the times just feeling like that's what they're supposed to do. And then people kind of, in a world where you suddenly have, education's really expensive now. So if a young person today has paid for education, has all this debt, they actually feel very emotionally attached to the subject that they've studied. And if they choose to change that subject and choose to do something else, they actually feel a lot of guilt that they've chosen to study something and that's all now been wasted. And I see a lot of this where career change is something we talk about quite openly. I actually see this more in older generation who said, I stumbled upon something. I think a lot of young people don't feel like that's a choice anymore. You can't stumble upon anything. You've paid all this money into this degree, into this life that you've chosen for yourself. So I think that's what happens when all these things result in an occupation, a skill, and then you don't feel like you can change, you can try something new. And that's when I think skills diversity becomes really important. We talk a lot about putting funding, investing more into building the newer generation, schools, education, and I think that's great. It's going to take 5 to 10 years for that to come into effect, right? Let's talk about girls in STEM. I see a lot of work going around sort of encouraging more girls into STEM. And this will take about 5 to 10 years for these amazing girls to suddenly, we're helping them choose the subjects that they're interested in, nothing to stop them, and they can choose a career that they want. But we can't really wait for 10 years. I think there's a very interesting age group and demographic of young women, especially between the ages of 17 to 22, who are either currently in education or have just perhaps come out of education or chosen not to go to university at all. This is a very specific demographic where if exposed to the digital economy, technology, and shown that there's a lot more to technology than just coding, which is something that stops a lot of women to date. I think we think of STEM as being too mathematical or too something. And to bridge that gap of two, it's like you have to spend more time studying it. But I just don't think that's a reality. The reality is technology especially is a hard skill. It can be learned. It can be learned on the side. It doesn't need to be a 3-year university degree. And I think if we target this demographic especially, show them everything that's out there in tech sales, tech marketing, project management, machine learning, AI, coding, cybersecurity. There's so much to do, and give them the opportunity to see these careers and see themselves in it. I think it's possible that we would be introducing new energy into the current workforce without having to wait for the future workforce, but at the same time, show people that careers are what they can make of it, really. And I think one of the best things of probably working at Deliveroo at the moment is, because it's a startup turned scale-up, currently in IPO, valued at multiple billions, I don't know, it keeps changing. It's truly a company, and I haven't experienced this before. I was working in multinational banks, which have their own culture. Working at Deliveroo, it's seen as a place where you're the doer, but you're also the leader. And you have complete control over what you put on the platform. So what I mean by that is, I think when it comes to like code, especially, they're not very attached to it. We can release whatever code we want today, multiple times in a day, and roll it back if it doesn't work. But there is that flexibility to do things all the time. And I think these companies, a lot of the times, are described as young companies. They do things in a certain way. There's always this sense of to something. But this actually attracts young people. Gen Z, studies show that Gen Zs think of work-life balance and personal well-being as their top preferred, let's say, perk at work. And they see salaries and brand reputation as the least. And this is a very stark difference between the generations that have come before them. And what this really shows is they don't really care about how big a corporation it is that they work for, but it's the fact that their work is valued and it serves a bigger purpose. And a lot of Gen Z actually focus on side hustles, and you might have heard of this. Side hustles are things like having a TikTok, blogging, doing something on the side all the time. One, to keep yourself engaged. Two, to make some more money, because apparently they're not spending enough money, right? According to media. And then the third aspect of it is that's a way to contribute to all these morals and values that they have without having an employer to constantly mirror those. They're not selecting employers based on what values does this employer believe in. They are selecting employers based on what employer will give me enough flexibility so I can practice the values that I believe in. I don't want to keep going on about it because I could talk for hours, but I just want to leave you with thinking of diversity in a way that all sorts of people look at it from all sorts of perspectives. And skills diversity to me is a very practical way of putting that into practice. Think of it as if somebody has applied for a job because they think they can do it, and their CV or everything that they've done in the past doesn't necessarily reflect that. That's okay, because these things could be learned when given the right platform to do so, the right skills to do so. You're investing in somebody's entire life, which they can mold and change as they please to. And finally, I think I'll also leave you with the thought of having more return to work programs, career change programs, etc. Because I think people who bring varied life and lived experiences bring diversity inherently. It stops being about this checklist that a lot of organizations tend to have, because that's one short way of making things diverse. But actually looking at people's lived experiences is a guaranteed way of introducing diversity into your organization. Thank you so much. I hope that was insightful in whichever way possible. And yeah, I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting, and an absolutely different perspective on things to add to the conversation today. Has anybody got any questions for Rituja? Go on, Emily.
I think I have two.
I'll allow two. Two's fine. Yeah.
So my first question is, what kind of practical mechanisms do you think would kind of allow for this kind of skills diversity, reskilling, upskilling? And the second is, I guess it's kind of me speaking from a kind of educational perspective, but are there things that schools, universities need to be focusing on? Do you think that they're not focusing on them at the moment that are going to serve Gen Z better?
Yeah. No, thank you.
Do you want to, so just to repeat that back so we've got them right. So the second question, because I'll work in that order, is there anything universities should be doing to support Gen Z better, is the question there. And the first one I've entirely forgotten. Did you remember that one?
Yeah, I
Brilliant.
think it was
Can you just repeat it
about practical mechanisms
That was it.
to implement like reskilling and upskilling. For sure, I think to answer your first question, a very practical way that has affected me personally and what I see in the ecosystem at the moment are boot camps. I'm going to focus on technology here for a second, but I really mean like coding boot camps or boot camps that focus on UX, project management, business analysis, call it whatever. Boot camps are really just a quick crash course to help people upskill in a much shorter period. And a lot of the times, boot camps, and I think they should be, free to the person in the bootcamp. The cost should actually be borne by the business that then gets to employ them. And this actually works out really well. There's way too many cases out there that show that there is a commercial impact, a commercial benefit to doing so. Bootcamps are often structured as to choosing people who have the interest, not necessarily any of the prerequisites that you need, such as university, qualifications, grades, interest. Then you join the bootcamp. Bootcamps can be as long as 8 weeks. That's the one I did. Or 6 months, another bootcamp that I did. I recently did a bootcamp on venture capital, just felt like it. But essentially, you have about 6 weeks to 6 months as a period to kind of focus on learning something from scratch. And then you have a pick of employers who are there to probably give you the opportunity directly into the workforce. So bootcamps help with that too. You're not left stranded to then find employment for yourself. And they really benefit from that because employers can invest into the bootcamp to find the right talent and have direct control on how they want to train that workforce. And once they introduce them into their organizations, I think there's a sense of, dare I say, loyalty, because somebody has actually invested in your learning, not just in all these perks that obviously we all deserve, but learning kind of allows people to see that organization as their own. And I think that's the biggest commercial benefit, really. Question 2 was about schools and universities. I think that's very interesting, and this is completely just my own personal views. I think it's important to have STEM subjects. It's important to have coding as early as possible in school, and very practical things. It doesn't have to always be about software development and agile right on day one, right? It can be given like small little robotic kits. I did loads of workshops that I was working with children, just building little robots, right? And I think you teach kids problem solving. And that's what really building technology is all about. Sure, we have coders, sure, we have software developers, we have researchers, but we actually have lots of other people who support this technical ecosystem in lots of other ways, solving other problems, not just the big world problems that we tend to focus on a lot, right? So yeah, I think a lot of practical education. And then finally, I think teaching young people, regardless of which part of education they're in, that nothing is too permanent. There isn't just a ladder to climb. You can go around the ladder, you can go under it, you can go wherever you want to. And I know I say this from a point of privilege, like just thinking of catalysts in my life that have enabled me to think like this were things like scholarships, these boot camps, mentors and coaches who took a chance on me, right? So I think if you standardize that a bit sooner in the educational system, where it's common knowledge that people can change when they want to, can stop working, start working, do whatever they want with their careers, and all of that is accepted, then I think it'll just create a society that is just more open to people's life choices, I think.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. Dan?
God, now, so you don't need to repeat the question. But 2 questions in the chat. First one is, do you think that Gen Z are seeing job hopping as a more effective way of progressing careers, more so than waiting for promotions to come in certain companies?
Yes, again, I think not a researcher, so don't have any statistics to say back, but absolutely, I think I can speak for myself maybe here. For sure, I see job hopping as a way to do something new, number one, and 2, I think you don't have to stick around for too long to understand how a culture of an organization is either going to benefit you or make you a bit complacent, I think. That's been quite interesting in my career, where I felt like I was in an interview, I was sold all these things, you joined the company, and a lot of the times the burden has been on me to fix things. Also, you care about this topic, you care about diversity, inclusion. Why don't you lead this group with nothing that comes back to you? Absolutely not. Do it for free. Right? And this was one of the things on Victoria's sheet this morning. And I realized the last job I left was within the 10 months of it. And somebody said, you should give it a chance. Give it at least a year. The reality is, I think when you job hop, you're the one taking the risk. It's Gen Z who are taking the risk of removing themselves from cultures and reintegrating into new cultures. The more often they do it, actually leads to burnout and things like that. And about 49% of Gen Z and 46% millennials think that burnout's happening very early in like their daily lives these days. And this is actually a consequence of having to job hop so often. But instead of saying why are they job hopping, we should be considering what makes them do so and what is it that a culture can't provide. And to be honest with you, it's usually mental stimulation. I think we can argue that maybe Gen Z have shorter attention spans thanks to the incessant scrolling all the time. But that's not a bad thing. That is a characteristic, and we as a society, as employers and organizations, will just have to adapt to it.
The second question that we've got come through is, how does Gen Z gain the connection between their skills and commercial value in a business?
That's very interesting. I was watching this TikTok the other day, which, and to be honest with you, a lot of my career knowledge comes from TikTok. People are, I think, a lot more open to talk on it. One of the things was the jobs of the future. So for example, there was a job which was Reels editor. So people who edit Instagram and TikTok Reels. Drone pilot was a fantastic one the other day. I think skills will be different. That's it. That's a reality, right? There are skills that are being created every day in this new world. Every time we create a new piece of software or technology, it leads to a brand new skill. I'm just trying to think, things are just coming to my mind. Like, I have a friend who is a graphic designer. He was a flight attendant for a bit and now works as a Webflow developer. And a lot of people don't know what Webflow is. It's just a no-code tool to building websites. And I'm just thinking about the fact that skills are being constantly created, and Gen Z feel like they can learn it from anywhere, just with a laptop. You can be on Udemy, you can be on YouTube, TikTok, wherever. You can learn on the go. You can practice those skills on the go. So I think the commercial viability is really for the organizations to find. How can we harness these new skills and gain commercial viability from them?
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And a big round of applause for Rituja. And thank you for that speak.
Thank you.
Fabulous. We are going to set up now for our panel. So if you would like to just grab a drink, have a comfort break, and then we'll set up for our panel and we'll get going in about 5 minutes. Okay.